Every Ferengi business transaction is governed by 285 rules of acquisition to ensure a fair and honest deal for all parties concerned. Well, most of them anyway. You worthless, tiny-eared fool. Don't you know the first rule of acquisition?
Yes, brother.
Then say it.
Once you have their money, you never give it back.
Exactly. The third rule clearly states, never spend more for an acquisition than you have to. The sixth rule of acquisition expressly states,
never allow family to stand in the way of opportunity. I certainly never have.
Keep your ears open.
Are you kidding? That's the seventh rule of acquisition.
The ninth rule of acquisition clearly states that opportunity plus instinct equals profit.
The 10th rule of acquisition is greed is eternal. A deal is a deal. Rule of acquisition number 16.
Rule of acquisition 17. A contract is a contract is a contract, but only between Ferengi.
And a Ferengi without profit.
It's no Ferengi at all.
The 18th rule of acquisition.
Never place friendship above profit.
21st rule of acquisition.
I'm glad you agree.
But the 22nd rule says a wise man can hear profit in the wind.
Rule of acquisition number 23. Nothing is more important than your health. Except for your money.
Never make fun of a Ferengi's mother. Rule of acquisition number 31.
I wanted to learn for the very best.
Which brings to mind the 33rd rule of acquisition. It
never hurts to suck up to the boss.
And as the 34th rule of acquisition states, peace is good for business.
That's the 35th rule.
Oh, you're right. What's the 34th?
War is good for business. It's easy to get them confused. The 47th rule of acquisition says, don't trust a man wearing a better suit than your own.
Just remember one thing, the bigger the smile, the sharper the knife.
48th rule of acquisition. At times like this, I'm reminded of the 57th rule of acquisition. Good customers are as rare as latinum. Treasure them. I think I agree with the 59th rule of acquisition. Free advice is seldom cheap.
The riskier the road, the greater the profit.
62nd rule.
That's right.
In accordance with the 74th rule of acquisition, knowledge equals profit, I've enclosed the specifications you've requested.
He said there were plenty of business opportunities right outside my door, but no, I had to follow the 75th rule of acquisition. Home is where the heart is, but the stars are made of platinum. Must I quote you the 76th rule of acquisition?
The 76th?
Every once in a while, declare peace. It confuses the hell out of your enemies.
Females and finances don't mix. Rule of acquisition 94.
What is the 95th rule of acquisition? Expand or die? He knows the rules better than you do.
Thank you for restoring my faith in the 98th rule of acquisition. Every man has his price. As a wise man once wrote, nature decays, but latinum lasts forever.
Rule of acquisition number 102.
Good lad. There's nothing to discuss.
But you know what the 103rd rule of acquisition says.
Not offhand.
Sleep can interfere
And I
with
don't care either. Dignity in an empty sack is worth the sack. Rule of acquisition number 109.
But remember rule of acquisition number 111. Treat people in your debt like family. Exploit them.
Rule of acquisition 112. Never have sex with the boss's sister. Rule of acquisition 125. You can't make a deal if you're dead.
Wives serve, brothers inherit. Rule of acquisition number 139, if I'm not mistaken.
I hadn't thought of that.
Really? I had.
But remember, be discreet.
Rule of acquisition 168. Whisper your way to success.
Just don't forget the 190th rule of acquisition.
Hear all, trust nothing. Good advice, sir.
It's always good business to know about new customers before they walk in your door.
Which rule of acquisition is that?
Oh, one of the high numbers. 194, I think.
What about rule of acquisition 203? New customers are like razor-toothed greenworms. They can be succulent, but sometimes they bite back.
Sometimes The only thing more dangerous than a question is an answer.
Rule of Acquisition 208.
Your brother can quote rules of acquisition too. I believe his favorite is 211. Employees are the rungs on the ladder of success. Don't hesitate to step on them.
Rule of Acquisition number 214. Never begin a business negotiation on an empty stomach.
But also remind him of the 217th rule of acquisition.
You can't free a fish from water. As the 223rd rule of acquisition
Please,
says...
I haven't heard a rule of acquisition in 7 years, and I don't want to hear one now.
Platinum lasts longer than lust. Rule of acquisition 229.
Maybe, but lust can be a lot more fun.
Rule of acquisition 239. Never be afraid to mislabel a product.
Remember rule of acquisition 263. Never allow doubt to tarnish your lust for latinum.
But I happen to be a firm believer in rule of acquisition number 285. No good deed ever goes unpunished. Rule of acquisition 286. When morn leaves, it's all over.
There is no such rule.
There should be.